Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Carter. I'm the editorial director of IGB. Today we're delighted to be hosting a webinar with Worldpay from FIS. And today they'll be discussing key insights from the annual Worldpay Gaming Payments Report. Our moderator today is Alex Morgan-Moody, who's Director, Vertical Growth Gaming Strategy and Go-To Market for Worldpay. I'll hand over to him to do the full intros very shortly. I was going to let you know there'll be a Q&A section following the presentation, so please do submit any questions you have as we go along. We'll try to address as many of them as possible in the allocated time. With that, I'm going to pass over to Alex. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks to IGB for hosting this webinar for us today. We're excited to discuss the 5th edition of the Global Gaming Payments Report, share some insights, and hopefully provide our unique perspective on what we think is happening in the industry right now. I'm really proud to introduce this team. I don't want to age us too much, but between us, I think we have a few decades of experience working in the gaming and payments industry from both the PSP side and the operator side, where I actually come from, having spent 11 years working with operators in both payments and corporate strategy before joining Worldpay last year. Alongside me, I have Ross Hunt, who is a senior member of the EMEA Relationship Management team and looks after several of our top tier operators, and Warren Tristram, who leads our North American gaming team.
Afternoon all.
Hi there, Alex. Afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, guys. So the Global Gaming Payments Report is a pivotal part of what Worldpay's contribution to the gaming industry consists of. It combines, hopefully, our decades of experience along with the dedicated gaming team's experience in both commercial, product, legal, and risk, along with our own data and that of trusted third parties, and combine it to hopefully provide one of the most widely used reports across the industry. I know when I was at STARS, at least, we used to look forward to reading this and every year spot the new trends. And it definitely did help in the planning sort of process when we're looking how to focus our sort of finite resources when we're trying to prioritize for global expansion. So what about you guys?
After you, Ross.
From a merchant perspective, this is just sort of putting a spin on it from the sort of the front end, I guess. You know, ever since I've been in the vertical, it's sort of been eagerly awaited each year. You know, I will be getting questions if we're sort of fast approaching the date it's normally delivered. So I know for a fact that merchants are really interested, the operators are really interested in it. You know, from a business review perspective, around the time of release, it very much features in our reviews with those merchants and operators, and sort of helps us structure and strategize for the year ahead. I think we also use it predominantly around some of our sort of localized merchant and operator events that we sort of hold out in Malta and Gibraltar, where we sort of pick up on some of the hot topics that are shown within that report. So yeah, it's eagerly awaited and very much discussed.
Thanks, Ross. Just to add to that, I think you said it, Alex, earlier when you were an operator. From my experience, I know that we actively get asked about when is the report going to be made available, when are you going to bring it out, and you know, reasons behind that, because I think it does help, as you inferred, I think, to you know, the valuable insight contained within the report helps influence the payment strategy, I think, for many of our gaming customers, our merchants that we deal with. It acts as a credible benchmark on the actual payment mix as well. So when a merchant launches within a territory, they can ensure that they've got the right preferred local payment method. So and the final point I think I'd add is that you know, when we do our business reviews with customers, as Ross has referenced, you know, we make reference to this at events and business reviews. And you can just see from the reaction of the customers that it's warmly received. So you know, I know we're going to touch upon it. It's going to be very high level in our podcast today, but I can only encourage those who haven't seen the report or aren't familiar with it to go and take a copy and just have a look at the valuable content. But hopefully the next 20 minutes or so, or however long this will run for, will provide that, will tantalize to go and provide that insight into what it provides.
Great. Yeah, thanks, guys. And yeah, so why don't we start by sort of giving an overview of what is in this year's report, And if we go to the next slide, I think in this year's report, we're not only going to cover like the payments trends, because we picked our 19 top pick countries where we've gone into deep analysis of what are the current trends, what do we expect to see. But we also looked at a wider level about trends and challenges in the industry. So there are articles covering things like responsible gaming and regulatory trends, the further rise of open banking, of course, and we've picked out 3 countries that we think are ones to watch in 2022. So today, as Warren, I think the guys mentioned, we're going to try and do like a quick look at some of those, some of the key insights. We're not going to cover everything. Of course, the report is available to download or to get from your relationship manager if you have one at Worldpay already. So we're going to look firstly at the increasing numbers of markets that are regulating and where they're creating opportunity and, of course, complexity for operators right now. We'll look at the renewed focus on responsible gaming currently and the impact that's having on operators. We'll show the data that indicates an acceleration towards the shift to digital wallets, something that was already happening pre-pandemic, but has certainly been accelerated by that. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit around what customers are expressing as their expectations around the speed of payouts. So picking up on regulatory complexity, and I mean, this has always been something that the gaming industry has had to face, and I think they've got pretty efficient at handling it, and it's no surprise why. With our data forecasting double-digit growth in 5 key markets, all of them being underpinned by new or expanding regulation in the period from 2020 to 2024. Obviously, as a PSP, it's our job to ensure that the right payment solutions are available to underpin this growth. So team, why are these markets so interesting?
So it's got the US there. Let's lead with that, shall we? So we have seen a huge shift in regulation in iGaming over the last few years, with state-controlled legislation and subsequent regulation. So this has led within the states to have a nuanced approach, depending on what gaming they might wish to particularly offer, the actual timings of when that market launches as well, which can be key certainly for that the US as a whole. I guess we should look at the US as a bit of a patchwork quilt on the fact that there are obviously 50 different states, and not all of them have actually regulated necessarily. So I suppose just to go and take us back a little bit, with the supported by the repeal of PASPA back in May 2018, we saw the first 4 states to regulate in 2020, in fact, were Nevada, Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, and we saw revenues which were approaching $1.5 billion for those states. Currently, we have 24 states which regulate sports betting now, and 6 of those actually have iGaming for casino and poker. And many other states enact some form of gaming or betting online, whether that's horses and lottery and such like. So as the regulation improves, this market is expected to grow, and this will provide improved regulation as well. In 2024, I think that we're expecting that the market is going to be around about 13 billion. That's what our insights is telling us. So hugely exciting from a US perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been forever. It feels like that the operators have been focused on as and when US will open up, and it's just really exciting to see the sort of states accelerate that now. So yeah, definitely one to watch. Looking over then to Europe, Ross, I guess like where your focus is, why don't you tell us a bit about sort of the Netherlands and Germany?
Yeah, and they're very much sort of the two ones in focus here. A lot of the conversations as sort of came into the vertical a few years back were about what new markets can we go into and the like, and now it's very much about how can we maintain the sort of market penetration that we have, and Netherlands and Germany are 2 great examples, right? These are markets that most merchants were operating in to some degree at one time or another, and then have both been going through regulation themselves. So Netherlands, the plan is to have the first cohort of licensees go live in October. There will be merchants that are having to run through other cooling off periods, so to speak, so they will probably enter the market a little later. but that sort of comes with, from a payments perspective, helping these merchants get ready for the re-entering into the Netherlands. So, where it comes to sort of testing on payment methods, there's specific requirements that they need to meet in order to run that testing. So we're sort of working closely with merchants to do that, to make sure they're not sort of breaching any rules prior to going live. We wouldn't want that to happen. And then obviously sort of moving into Germany specifically, then you've got a couple of things to consider in Germany. You've got obviously the sports betting side of things, which are licenses are starting to be issued now around that, and you've got on the slightly sort of on the other side of things with regards to the casino games, etc. You've got the kind of transitional regime, which is more about a list of requirements that you need to meet if you're to process those sorts of transactions there. So and that brings complexities for the operators, because there are different requirements between the two sets, right? And if you've got a website that is offering both, then you need to be quite clear in how you're splitting these two and conforming with the relevant requirements, as it were to speak. So yeah, I think but both are hotly anticipated and have been very much on the horizon for the last sort of year or so with regards to discussions we're having with merchants. But as far as the payment methods and types that we're expecting to be there, they're going to be the same as they were originally. So Germany, you've got the likes of Sofort, GiroPay, big in wallets, and not so big on the cards. And then in the Netherlands, Ideal is the one that always stands out for that market. So it's it'll be exciting times the next 6 to 12 months in these markets.
For sure. And I think just picking up on LATAM then, and I guess this has definitely been looked at as one of the huge growth opportunities for most of the big multinationals outside of the US, anticipated state-by-state regulation. And looking at Argentina, I think it's clear that they're pursuing a similar sort of state-by-state or province-by-province approach. And right now, there's, I think, 3 provinces plus the city of Buenos Aires are regulated. And our focus has been on enabling our existing domestic card acquiring solution to enable our gaming operators to process domestic transactions, as well as working with the local APMs to make sure that they are positioned and enabled. And yeah, I mean, the first of our merchants are going through the application process now for domestic acquiring, so that's great to see, and we hope that there are many more opportunities out there for those operators that are thinking of obtaining those licenses. Don't know, Ross, if there's anything else you'd add there.
To be honest, Alex, you've covered it there. I think it's new to the operators, Argentina, on these licenses, and it's relatively new to us on the basis that nobody's really gone in there from a gaming perspective. So yeah, there's been a lot of work with the legal teams here, just around making sure that we're processing in the right way. But like you say, yeah, like active conversations with several merchants around entering that market. So I would expect we'd have a bit more insight sort of over the next 12 months around Argentina specifically, once we've actually got some working knowledge in the market.
Yeah, and I suppose the challenge with state by state, which the US faced and which operators are bound to face there, is obviously geolocation and the complexities around where the player is located prior to or when transacting. So yeah, we understand that, and we work with a number of the geolocation operators in the market currently. So yeah. And then just very briefly, I suppose we can touch on Brazil, and needless to say, a huge opportunity as and when the regulations that were approved in the Senate in 2018 come to fruition. It now looks likely that that's going to come into force for 2022 in time for the Football World Cup. And we're similar to Argentina, really focusing our efforts on enabling our domestic acquiring solution and as well as enabling the existing APMs we're all familiar with, but also identifying new local APMs such as their branded open banking solution PICs. For gambling, to try and support these operators' launch plans. So yeah, a very exciting market, one we forecast to be worth maybe $1 billion by 2024. I don't know, Ross, if there's any conversations you've had with merchants
I mean, again, Brazil's always been a subject for discussion. It's not one that Worldpay have been able to support from a gambling perspective or gaming perspective. So you know, internally, I think we're waiting with bated breath around the regulation, because you know the discussions have been there for several years. It's just, you know, we're waiting for that regulation. So as soon as it comes, you know, we've got quite a few conversations to be picking up with. And like you say, you know, with an estimated 1 billion by 2024, it's a huge market to go into, and will really open up that sort of South America piece. And it'd be lovely, I think, just to have it in time for the World Cup, for the sports betting. It seems like it needs to be there, right? I think as well, at the same point, I think on a sort of side note, I know within Brazil they were looking to do some state lottery work, which probably hasn't gone as expected. So I think that's still being worked on, which means that I think that the push for 2022 is going to be a tough one, given there's a few different angles that they're coming at this in. But yeah, fingers crossed we can get the sports betting up and live for the World Cup.
So it's nice to have a carrot there, but yeah, it's something that is difficult to promise on at this stage, I guess. So yeah, I mean, so those are 5 markets. I think that they're the biggest growth forecast markets that we have over the period that we've been reviewing data for this report. And I think, yeah, they all present very different challenges, but we are definitely focused on positioning ourselves to support anybody who is going into them, as we are doing already with a number of our customers. Moving on then to touch on responsible gaming for a second. In our article, we dive into some of the key trends in areas of increasing focus for both the regulators and operators, and I think that's rightly so. So like them, we obviously understand that gaming is a form of entertainment for many, and that growth needs to be driven sustainably by reducing or removing the risk of individual harm. Globally, however, I think there's still a lot of differences in approach that we see, and that's perhaps no more clearly illustrated than when it comes to advertising. I mean, Ross, there's been a lot of developments on this in EMEA. What have we seen?
Yeah, I mean, this is oh, sorry, there's a bit of an echo. Sorry. That's gone. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, this one, you know, there's been some noise around this subject for a while now. You know, going back to 2019 when they had the sort of targeted at the football side of things, but the sort of whistle to whistle initiative, which was voluntary and enacted then. And that was sort of aimed at, you know, reducing the amount of exposure of advertising to sort of the younger world, as it were, so to speak. So, you know, from 2019 right through to what the Netherlands are doing as part of their kind of licensing program, you know, there's specifically calling out, you know, the 18 to 24-year-old group, where there will be, you know, additional elements around, you know, advertising and targeting those groups, just to make sure that, you know, you're not influencing them in a way that they shouldn't be. So it's a long gone discussion. You know, there's always the kind of the in-play betting discussion point that's on the table. So yeah, I don't think it's definitely a contracting market within EMEA, I'd say. You know, which we'll see where it goes, but I think that's probably in some way a contradiction to what's happening with Warren's sort of world in the US.
I think that shows the maturity of the European market versus the US, on the fact that, to your point, Ross, and as you know, it is in complete contrast. I think we're seeing advertising spend reaching so about 160 million by sports betting operators this year. So there is no hard regulation, while there's governance generally with regards to what operators should do. They have very strict KYC controls and such like, but not necessarily around advertising. I know that industry bodies and boards provide recommendations, so and lots of operators adhere to that and do things in a responsible manner. There's no doubt about that. But we are seeing that advertising market share with betting and gaming companies is increasing, and with those increasing costs, we're actually seeing a higher CPA as well. There was an article in the Times just last Sunday which referenced the Flutter Group, and I think that they were talking about their CPA. I think it was $261 per player, which I think is quite top heavy. Operators will know what their CPA costs are as well, and I think it's also referenced in another article for BetMGM as well, where they're targeting their longer term player acquisition cost to be around about $250 per player. Again, fairly significant. So there is a little bit of a land grab. We're seeing states as they regulate at different times that operators are endeavoring to be the first to be within the state to go and sign up those consumers on the fact that if you can actually go and target and acquire those customers quickly, they hope that they will be stickier. As a result, I think that has been driving up CPA costs for operators. But I think I come back down to operators need to think about the product proposition, the service. It's not necessarily about being first to the market. And I know that there are some large European operators who are entering some states after some of the well-established US operators now. And they're going to have to go and provide a good differentiation in order to go and ensure that they can actually go and grow their market share. So while they're, responsible gaming is at the forefront of gaming operators, there's no doubt. But we are seeing that there is this land grab, certainly from an advertisement perspective, to try and actually go and build that customer base.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no inference that, particularly because there's so many multinational operators going after that. They all learn their lessons, around responsible gaming in the more mature markets. It's just interesting where the regulators haven't chosen to tread currently when it comes to advertising. What sort of advantage can be leveraged there? But yeah, very interesting to see the contrast there. I don't know, Ross, when it comes to stake limits, that's another one that we've seen kind of like more focused on EMEA, really, not really something that's coming into play in the US too much just yet.
Yeah, completely. I think we saw it sort of a while back with the fob teas in store, just sort of more on the land-based side of things, where they hugely reduced the limits there, and obviously that had quite an influential impact into sort of the land stores, as it were. But there's, if we look at some of the transitional regime around Germany, the limits there are a lot lower than they would have been previously. And I think the UK, similar thing. The UK is looking at sort of online potential gambling stakes being reduced sort of quite considerably. So that's sort of one that's under discussion as well. I think just as well, just in general, obviously the credit card ban in the UK is, these are all methods to try and protect the consumers' rights and the players. So between the two of them, it seems to be that it's moving forward on that side of things. And from a UK credit card ban perspective, there's other merchants, other territories that are considering this, and obviously the UK is a bit of a shining light when it comes to kind of how we're regulating and how we're working with the sort of the industry. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be more to come on this one.
Thanks. All right, getting a bit more specifically related to payments now then, and I think one of the big macro trends obviously that we're observing, not just in gaming but across all of the digital sectors, is the rise of digital wallets. And obviously, I think most operators probably have seen the value of digital wallets for some time. But I think even we were surprised the speed by which consumers' expectations have been reset. So in many ways, I think accelerated by the pandemic, but certainly something that we felt was on the horizon for some time prior to that. And I think it's never really been more critical to optimize the payment journey because nowadays consumers are kind of used to those very streamlined, digitally optimized payment journeys that they get at the big sort of streaming services or tech companies, and now everybody needs to keep up. Everything is being consumed online, and I think it's very important that we do that. So digital wallets are a huge enabler of that. What are we seeing in gaming currently?
Yeah, completely that, Alex. I think yeah, the gaming report has been championing the digital wallet side of things for a while now, and we're seeing that sort of adoption. I think there's the key bit for me that you called out there is around this seamless experience, and there's a few things that will improve that, right? The actual wallets themselves have improved their processes now. There's a lot more stuff happening on a mobile, so there's less sort of manual entering of passwords. There's more facial recognition at these things, so it makes that whole wallet process a lot slicker and a lot easier. Combine that with some of the with some of what PSD2's brought around from a card scheme perspective, where if you're looking to get a bet on before kickoff, or whatever, if you're time restricted, you don't want your 3DS box popping up and having to remember what your password is. So I think people just know now how these wallets are working, and they're a seamless experience that they can rely on. So it offers some consistency across operators as well. So it's I think that's the key thing to pull out here, is really just about the experience and how it's improved within the mobile journey as well.
Just to add to that, I'm conscious that the payments modernization initiative from the AGA within the US has been accelerated by the pandemic. In fact, by encouraging, forcing consumers to actually move to using digital wallets. So I know that from a number of operators and vendors, service providers, the likes of IGT, Every, Fabi, and Sightline as well, they have their own proprietary e-wallets, and so they are moving. Their digital e-wallets is something which is they're looking to go and use in an omni-channel situations for land-based and also online card not present transactions. So the pandemic has actually accelerated the adoption and use of these wallets, such that we had the opening of Resorts World within Vegas. I think it's the first time that there's been a casino, a resort casino within the Strip, which has opened been opened in the last gosh, I'm going to get this wrong now, so last 15-20 years or so. And the interesting debut of that opening was the fact that provides cashless wagering. So supported by Sightline, they're actually offering cashless wagering to their customers. So using that digital wallet, which many vendors, as I say, can actually use that in an omni-channel arena as well. So I think those are key changes which we'll see within the US, certainly from this year, but accelerated and will grow next year. Within the report, I think that we've seen 10 markets have seen double-digit growth. Those including Argentina, which was referenced on the earlier slide, the US, in Colombia, interestingly. And I think for those three markets, they're seeing growth of 43, 27 and 20% respectively for those three markets. So yeah, digital wallets, I think, are becoming more relevant and are covering multiple channels as well. It's not just online. So it's going to become a consumer's preference, and that's been accelerated by the pandemic.
Yeah, I think those omni-channel applications as well, they have implications not just for payments, but also for loyalty and creating that single view of a customer across brands. It's really exciting, and the opportunities for growth as a result of that technology are massive. So it's very interesting to watch and to be a part of.
I think just to add on that one, Alex, as well. Like if you look at it, Google Pay isn't isn't widespread yet, right? So as that looks to roll out, sort of, if it follows in the footsteps of Apple Pay, then you've got a huge number of additional adoption that can take place there. So there's a lot of growth still there, I think.
100%, I agree. Cool. So shifting on to payouts now. See, I remember years ago the debate raging between whether the optimal payout strategy was actually to prioritize the retention of funds within the ecosystem, or whether you put first the player's convenience and focused on the speed of payouts. It seems now that maybe that argument has been put to bed, with 41% of the players that we surveyed globally expressing a preference that operators could pay out winnings in just 30 minutes. So in the payments industry, I think we have made huge strides in recent years to enable that. And we've certainly got an interesting article on open banking in our report that you can reference for one. But what else are we sort of seeing in the market?
Yeah, like from a payouts perspective, if we look at the fast access funds, then Visa Direct now has been around for a few years, and I'd go as far to say it's a must if you're wanting to retain your customers now. So like you say, that enables payment of winnings within 30 minutes. Reality is it's a lot quicker than that, and in certain instances I think that old way of doing things maybe created some confusion for the consumer, right? Because they weren't sure when the funds are going to hit over a couple of day period. So if you're looking to spend those funds prior to having them, and for whatever reason they're not there, you can get declined transactions. Actually, there's something to say about whether the fact that you're getting the customer their funds back quicker means that they've actually got them there to spend should they want to. So it benefits them in that way. And obviously the payouts typically can be a slightly larger sum than necessarily the original stake. So there's definitely an incentive to get that money back quicker, and a demand from the consumer. I think the next bit is really closing that loop, and we've obviously now got the MasterCard Send within the market, so it's covered from both angles. And that was always sort of maybe the remaining point or of contention from operators was we don't want to just offer it to Visa customers, we want to offer it to all our customers, and especially within Europe and other markets around the world where MasterCard is as big as Visa, if not bigger. So yeah, from that side of things, it's very much a must. It's no longer a nice to have, I'd say. And then from an open banking perspective, we've obviously got our bank out solution that ties into that whole open banking process. So the ability to take that initial transaction and then within the same relationship use our functionality to pay that out is really useful, and that's sort of an area of open banking that I think we're leading on. So that's a nice and with regards to the conversations around open banking, these have really notched up in the last 6 months. I think previously it was very much fact finding. There were other key priorities, obviously with PSD2 last year, etc., and into this year, unfortunately. But now a few of these hurdles are out the way. Then it's now down to the nitty gritty and actually talking to merchants about rolling out a solution. So yeah, it's full steam ahead on that front, I think.
I think I'm just going to echo what you said there, so won't dwell long on it, other than the fact that speed of payouts is a critical consideration for all operators when defining their retention and loyalty strategies as well. So it's more than a preference, it's a necessity, and so operators just have to have these as part of their product offering within their service proposition, and as part of that loyalty side of it, customers actually see their money as being safe and easily accessible, which builds that trust and retention. Actually, sorry, Alex, just before cutting in, just one more thing to add. And we're talking about Visa Direct and MasterCard Send. So we do have Visa Direct available through Worldpay, and I'm pleased to say that MasterCard Send, or GGPP as they call it within MasterCard, the Gaming and Gambling Payments Program, by its correct name in the US, has just been put into our most recent drop, and we will be rolling that out before the end of this year. So that's something that I'm quite excited about and I can take to operators.
Yeah, very excited to finally close that loop. And I think, yeah, I think it was in our Power Your Payments survey from last year, particularly in the US. So typically in the European markets, your average consumer holds 1 to 2 accounts in gaming. But in the US, because the market is so up to grad, we're talking like 3 to 4 accounts, and often they'll want to or expect moving their funds between those accounts. So precisely for the reasons you say, loyalty and retention, it's so important to have these fast solutions available for payouts. So great that we are close to being able to offer them. I think so. Finally, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, in terms of like the specific articles that we call out, there is a report that we've written on 3 markets that we think are worth watching in 2022. I don't know, guys, if there's anything you want to briefly touch on there. Obviously, there's much more detail in the report, and we'd encourage you to download and take a look. But guys, is there anything you'd add?
So I think maybe, you know, we've highlighted these 3. It'll be interesting to see in a year's time or two whether we've called these out correctly. But I guess just with regards to Portugal, that's just, you know, regulation has been in place in there since 2015. You know, there is a growing demand with revenues year on year. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing that generally across the board in many of the markets. But sports betting is overtaking casino betting, or that certainly took place in 2020. So that, you know, being driven by huge consumer demand. You know, this is all despite the increasing tax rate. We know that it can be quite a challenging environment for operators to work with in Portugal, knowing that the online casino tax rate has increased recently from 15 to 25%. So despite this, we believe that it is one to go and consider. So let's see if we'll be proved right by that particular country. Ross, anything you'd like to add?
I mean, to me, just Georgia stands out as kind of a, you know, Flutter Entertainment, you know, bought a major stake in Ajara Bet there. So, you know, it's a fast growing regulated market. So, you know, perfect for that kind of thing. And obviously Flutter have seen it as an attractive proposition. So, you know, as one of the market leaders out there, that's something to back up that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so in the final section of this webinar then, before we go into the Q&A, we're going to take kind of a whistle-stop tour, given the time we have left, through the 19 country profiles that we cover in the report. Obviously, for those of you that download the report, you'll be able to review these in-depth analysis for each market, most of which is going to be impossible for us to cover in the allotted time today. But with the team, I think we'll just go through some quick impressions, and we'll kick off with EMEA. So start with EMEA, where generally I think the payments landscape is relatively mature and well established, with local methods in almost all of the countries that I think, as we've already mentioned, when we've been talking about Netherlands and Germany, they're kind of critical to any operator who wants to be taken seriously and to grow in those markets. So if we take a look at this slide then, what's standing out to you both?
I mean, UK at the bottom there, the also to consider piece, you know, MasterCard, it's been touted that they're obviously growing their market share from an issuer perspective, and, you know, we should be seeing that, you know, grow. So I think, you know, making sure that, you know, operators are managing that conversation with their card holders. So if there's a shift in issuers, then you don't want a load of people that are trying to use a card that's no longer available for use. So and sort of, you know, shifting decline rates in the wrong direction. So making sure that conversation is had with your customers is quite key. You know, the UK is an easy one to pull out. Like I say, they're very much sort of, you know, a market leader in the vertical. So you know, there's a few things that we've seen there with the credit card ban as well, which was done in a very smooth way and communicated out to the industry and their players in a really well done, I think. So yeah, if we can go along the lines of that for the card issuing migration, that would be a good place to start.
As I say, not dwelling on this, I think that those other considerations for Belgium, it references it there, Bank Contact, and for Czechia, eConto and Agmo, you know, they're established local bank transfer methods which are essential for any operator to operate in those countries.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on to slide 13 then, and I think The interesting thing here is probably France, where Google's had an open attitude due to the regulation there to offering gaming apps both in the Google Play Store and also to be enabled for the Google Pay wallet. And I think this has had a huge impact for operators. So this is the kind of model that we hope to replicate with Google. We hope Google replicates when it comes to the new markets that they've opened up for Google Play. And of course, in our position, we work with them and many other digital wallet providers to sort of constantly review their appetite for gaming and the gaming industry. And we hope that those 50 markets can be a signpost to where we hope Google Pay can go next for gaming. I don't know, guys, if there's anything else you'd add to that slide.
One thing I'd just mention, and this is refreshing, you know, we support regulated gaming, and we're proud to do that. And when you look at Germany, they've actually got improved regulation as well. And when you go and look at the projected growth, that's outstripping other countries within Europe at more than 11% CAGR, which is a healthy return. So, you know, regulated gaming is something to be, you know, cheered about, I think, and we're proud to do that.
Yeah, cool. All right, Doyle, let's take a look at slide 14 then. And Ross, is there anything standing out to you here?
A couple of things really. I think you know, if you look at Italy, you know, one of the predominant card types over there is the post-pay side of things. But if you look at the adoption for digital and mobile wallets, it's huge, right? And Google Pay isn't there as yet. So I can only see that number growing as you know, potentially that gets rolled out. Netherlands again, like, you know, I don't mean to bang on about it, but it's a target for a lot of operators, just given the regulations coming in this year. Like I say, I think most people are familiar with the ways of working within that area. Like I say, ideal is very much the preferred method there. So it's just about making sure that going back into that market is managed in the right way. And I think the CAGR rate that we have at 21% sort of just reflects the fact that, you know, there's a lot of growth off the back of, you know, maybe not so high trading in that market over recent times. So yeah, I think that's the key to call out.
I agree.
I'd actually be interested to see. Sorry, Alex. With regards, you know, it's such a huge growth rate for the Netherlands. It's a good, you know, gaming target market. Ideal is dominant within the market as well. It's interesting to see what open banking might do on the fact that any potential new payment service providers or PISPs, AISPs, which might come to the fore, you know, will target that market when they look at the opportunity of it, and it'll be interesting to see that whether Ideal will necessarily remain the preeminent payment solution. So I think with open banking, I think that across a number of these markets, Belgium included, that you know, that there will be increased competition, which could be interesting to a changing payments landscape going forward.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good point, Warren. You know, when Worldpay support Ideal processing now, and the open banking solution that we've got, we'll sort of look to cover the Netherlands in you know, in not too distant future. So I think from both angles, you know, we can support in that respect.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, next we'll just take a brief look at North America then, and I guess we have our resident expert on the call. So over to you, Warren.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, Alex. Set me up here. Yeah, America. What can we tell you about America? It is, I think I've made reference to it already on one of the earlier slides. It's an exciting, ever-changing, dynamic market. We have 24 plus states which allow for sports betting. In fact, it's quite a complex tapestry. I was going to say it's like a patchwork quilt. I think I may have referenced earlier, but it's a complex tapestry. When we look at the gaming landscape there. Currently, 6 states offer iGaming, which is online casino or poker. 10 states regulate for iLottery. More than 24 states regulate for internet wagering on horses. 22 states have passed laws affirming the legality or establishing regulations for fantasy sports contests. And 12 states allow for esports. And as I said earlier, 24 states, there we go, I've completed the roll call there. 24 states allow for sports betting. So this makes it a very complex environment to go and operate, and all forms and varieties of states are covered. We spoke about the growth of digital wallets there as well, and I think that's an exciting side that we need to go and look at to see how that will be embraced, as omni gaming, I think, is going to become very relevant. We've got the excitement of Arizona, which will be regulating next month. There'll be potentially half a dozen states which will regulate this year, which makes it a highly lucrative market, as I say, with real dynamism, not only in those states which have actually regulated for those different types of gaming. As other states regulate, those who have already regulated will maybe expand their licensing regimes to adopt other types of gaming. So it's something which, you know, and I'm proud and pleased to say that our team can actually help customers try and navigate, you know, what is happening inside that environment. So very complex, very exciting. The other thing, I'm conscious of time here as well, the other thing to maybe add is that we are seeing through card acceptance that the major banks for debit and GPR, or general purpose reloadable cards, are embracing online gaming as well. We have our separate MCC codes, which we need to go and operate online, the 7800 series. And with that, we saw earlier this year Chase actually open up and embrace the acceptance of debit, which was a real land shift, a change in the environment with regards to gaming. And also, just to go and provide some updated information, Bank of America, it was suggested from the 1st of July and the 18th of August, i.e. tomorrow, but I think those dates have actually come forward. I think we have actually started to see acceptance prior to the 18th of August with regards to debit and GPR cards for Bank of America for MCC 7801 and 7802 respectively for those 2 days. So with that, it's easier to go and actually improve your card acceptance and card acquiring through the major banks as well. So you know, without droning on, I think those are maybe the subject areas I'd call out.
Thanks, Warren. Really appreciate that. I also, it's probably just worth also saying, in Canada, obviously with Ontario going forward, that's an exciting opportunity. You know, again, presents the geolocation challenges, and operators will need to decide how to approach that. But of course, domestic acquiring will be available via us.
You got me my favourite subject of the US, and I totally forgot to talk about Canada, but Canada is equally exciting. Ontario is going to go and regulate. You know, they recently went and passed the single event legislation for single event sports betting as well. So I think that that's a major pivot point, which will actually go and enable Ontario to be very successful. I know that many of the operators that I deal with are also talking about how they expand Canada. I think Ontario will not be the sole province. We will see the others follow suit over a period of time as well.
Great. I'm really conscious of time and giving a chance for questions to come through. So I think we'll very quickly touch on Latin America. Thank you for that, Warren. And I mean, we've more or less covered this already when it comes to Argentina and Brazil. They're obviously the two big opportunities. We talked about it. Suffice to say, I'd say we're working with all locally regulated operators in Colombia and Mexico. We're looking to enable our domestic card acquiring capabilities there as well, and any locally popular APMs. So I don't think there's too much more to say on that. And perhaps if we finally go on to Oceania, and I don't know, Ross, is there anything that you know, a few of your merchants are facing Australia? Is there anything to add there, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, Australia, you know, is still a growth market. You know, it's saying 5% there. You know, I have conversations locally with those guys, and you know, in certain areas we're seeing, you know, stuff outstrip that number. But the interesting bit around here is obviously, you know, what with the different variants of lockdown that they've had as part of COVID, there's been a sort of a shift to that online piece. You know, some of the land-based and the TAB locations where you might be placing bets sort of in person have been closed down. So there's been that real shift to online. I think at the start of this whole process, a few of the operators, their online proposition or their app proposition wasn't probably where it needed to be. So they've had a bit of time now to bring that up to speed. So I think you'll start to see those users sort of staying online and staying within the app environment. One final thing to mention, the credit card ban over in Australia has been a constant discussion point as well. I believe in the last couple of weeks that's now that's not going to be going ahead, if I remember correctly. So I think that's sort of a point to pull out as well. And yet, like I say, Visa Direct and the like isn't maybe as adopted over there as maybe it is elsewhere. So that's another area that things will look to sort of move in that direction, I'd say.
Great. Well, thank you guys. As I sort of said, that was Whistlestop. For anyone who's actually interested, of course, there's much more depth in the report, so please do go ahead and download that. Which brings us to our Q&A. So thank you to everyone for listening, and to those of you that submitted questions. I think we've got about 8 minutes left, so we'll try and get 1 or 2 of those questions answered for you. And we'll kick off, I think, with this one, which is quite interesting. So, is crypto acceptance still a long way off for most gambling operators? Either of you want to kick off on that? Go for it.
So crypto, interesting. I think that there's a lot of crossover. Worldpay is very supportive of crypto merchants, brokers, and the like. So we have some good experience of that sector. At the moment, though, no one is really gambling on Bitcoin in the mainstream. Certainly with the operators, the licensed regulated operators that we work with. In the future, I think we may see cryptocurrencies being used for deposits, especially since, as I say, there is a good crossover with the consumers that have a preference for online gambling. And so they're already actively open-minded about using crypto. So they hold and invest in cryptocurrencies. But with that being said, I think the gambling industry has several interlocking sets of requirements around identity verification, fraud prevention, that I think makes crypto acceptance difficult to implement, and run counter to the essence of what cryptocurrencies are about. So there are definitely challenges around KYC, AML, and such like. However, I would not say that it's impossible, and would predict that other consuming-facing industries will deploy these technologies more widely first. But we will see, gaming merchants, gambling merchants adopt crypto more so in the longer term. As I say, there are operators who do use crypto today, so I'm not saying that they don't, but it's certainly not mainstream.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that, Warren, is like you say, that in regulated markets, you've got regulation to consider. So I'm sure the regulators will have a view on how crypto is used within that environment.
That's Ross, just on that, and appreciate we're limited at time, but I know Nevada, many of the regulators, they explicitly state the different depositing mechanisms that you're allowed. So the regulator will need to actually go and embrace and change the regulation for the depositing methods, depending upon. Not everyone is so prescriptive necessarily, but that needs to happen first.
Yeah. I think it's nice to see though what Worldpay is doing in terms of investment in our infrastructure to support crypto as a vertical, much like we already do with gaming. The investments we're making in legal risk and product, as well as the commercial teams, to try and support this as a vertical. So of course, crypto acceptance, we want to be at the forefront of that as and when the regulations permit us to do so. So yeah, great question. Thank you for that. I think we'll try one more and see how much time we've got left. So this one here, we've kind of covered a bit of it in the report, but it's interesting to nonetheless. What was the impact of lockdowns on operators in 2020 and beyond? And how do we see the industry changing as countries try to return to pre-pandemic operations?
I can start with that one, Alex. I think from a mixed impact, really, depending on what your sort of part of gaming was, really. Obviously, casino, poker saw sort of quite a heavy uptick for the first sort of year, and for obvious reasons, everyone was sort of stuck at home and there wasn't much sporting event happening. So that kind of made sense. You know, as things have started to open up, we've seen a leveling out. It was great to have the Euros in this environment, because we saw like a real spike back into the sports betting side of things. So yeah, I think everyone, what it has done is sort of helped to sharpen everyone's sort of online game, as it were. So you know, although there will be some attrition back to sort of the land-based stuff, and we'll probably see some normalising of where the volumes lie, and sort of that shift maybe back off some of the poker and casino into other realms, then yeah, I'd be interested to see how it lands. But I think in general, the industry, you know, would have taken some really positive things away from the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think Ross has covered it well there. I think it's interesting when you go and look at it from certain markets as well. I think it's to remember that the pandemic and lockdown was a series of lockdowns which happened at different stages in different countries. So obviously the results and operators have flexed depending on where they've targeted and how they've performed. So it's very difficult to go and draw analogies on one operator against the other for a particular time frame. It depends on where they're dominant and what they go and provide. Obviously online was boosted and accelerated in certain sports. Despite not having live sports, we saw the exotic markets of Eastern Russian ping pong tournaments and such like. Eastern Russian, I think I've made that up by myself. But anyway, but I think the only thing I would like to add, I think, is that it has accelerated, as I referenced earlier, payment modernization, cashless wagering. So in all, with regards to what's happening within the casino environment, the card present environment, we're actually seeing a real change in how the consumer experience with regards to gaming is taking place from a land-based perspective in the US, and I think that will follow suit and is true across the rest of Europe as well, and the rest of the world.
Great, thank you, really good points. Listen, with 2 minutes to spare, I think we'll wrap up there. So once again, thank you to all of you for your time today. Another quick reminder, the 2021 Global Payments Report is available to download from our website. Otherwise, if you have an existing Worldpay relationship manager or corporate support, please reach out to them and request a copy. We'll be more than happy to share with you. All the topics mentioned today are covered in a lot more depth, and hopefully provide some insight. I hope you've enjoyed today's session and are excited as we are about the next chapter of gaming. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Alex, Ross, Warren. That was a great discussion. And as Alex says, all we've got time for today. So today's webinar has been recorded and available to listen to on demand shortly on igamingbusiness.com for you to rewatch and share with your colleagues. So otherwise, we'll see you all very soon. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.